guess you already know that we have the small webinar for the environmental things in China, including the environmental challenges and the environmental compliance in China. So before we start my presentation, just a brief introduction about myself. The pages keep jumping. So my name is Mandy, and I am the Senior Associate of DP now. I used to work in an international legal consulting firm in Washington, D.C. as the environmental related legislation consulting service. And I also worked in a top Chinese law firm as an environmental lawyer. And before I became a senior associate of DP, I fully work for the environmental compliance and environmental legal services. So, and I believe that during the past couple of years, all the companies in China has more or less felt or has went through the pressure of the environmental challenges that have went through during the past years. So that's the reason why I believe it would be necessary or it would be helpful for us to know more information about the environmental challenges and also more information about how we can confront or how we can respond for the environmental challenges in China. Since we are clients, so we don't repeat the introduction of our company, just to say that our company includes various services, including the contracts and also including the environmental compliance service. And today we will talk about, first is about the background information about the environmental compliance in China, and also we will talk about some legal liabilities that could happen during the environmental operations. And also we would like to provide certain suggestions or small tips for us how to respond for the environmental challenges in China. First of all, I would like to share a news that was published in February this year. A survey by NASA shows that our Earth, our planet, has become greener for the past decades, and which is good news. And among all the areas around the world, China and India has dominated the greening of the Earth. I believe a lot of people doubted about this result, but at least we can see that maybe the Chinese government has made some efforts to improve the environment, and let's see whether it works or not. Before that, I also would like to say that if you have any questions during my presentation, feel free to unmute yourself and feel free to interrupt me at any time. And also by the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A. So feel free to ask me for any questions, or if you have any comments, feel free to let us know. So we can see that, wait a minute, let me move this. This is the flow chart of the national air quality of PM 2.5. We can see that starting from 2013 to 2018, the concentration of PM 2.5 around China has been reduced gradually, no matter in Beijing area, in Yangtze area, or in Pearl River area. So, as I mentioned previously, I believe that most of us has become aware of the stricter environmental enforcement and has become aware of the policy change regarding the Chinese government regarding for the environmental protection. That's based on the enforcement and based on the policy change, we can see that the air quality of China has gradually improved, although it's not good enough. And also, 2.5 around the Yangtze area, which is like Shanghai, Anhui, Jiangsu, and Zhejiang, the concentration has reduced gradually. So how can this change happen? If you have stayed in China for quite a long time, or if you were born in China, I believe you must know that if we come back to around like 1990, the economy of China is quite, I would say, not that good. And also the environment during that time is pretty good because we don't have economy at all. And after like 2000, the economy has grown up rapidly, and associated with this, the environment changes. If I remember correctly, it should be around like 2011. It is the first time that the public becomes aware of the existence of smoky fog, which is really harmful to everybody's health. And starting from 2012, the Chinese government started to officially monitor the concentration of PM 2.5. And also in around 2014, Kunshan, which is close to Shanghai in Jiangsu province, an explosion happened in Kunshan, which caused 146 fatalities. And in 2015, a big explosion happened in Tianjin, which caused the worst fatalities. So we can see that with the economic growth, the environment and safety accidents happened also a lot during the past decades of the China. So if we look into the EHS legislation enforcement, which means that environmental, health, and safety legislations that were newly published or amended during the past decade, we can see that starting from 2011, the number of new laws and regulations has been increased substantially, especially after 2016. During the 2 years from 2016 to 2018, the number of new laws and regulations has been double, almost double than the previous 5 years. So as I said previously, we can see that the China government has aroused their attention to the environmental and the health and safety things. The one important area is about the new laws and regulations. So what happens to the new laws and the regulations? What is the impact on the amendment? This is the list of the major environmental law amendments for the past 5 years. Almost 5 years, starting from the environmental protection law. Almost all the major environmental laws has been amended for example, like air pollution, wastewater, soil pollution is also newly published. And so what happened to the new laws and regulations? What would be the tendency for the environmental regulation reforms? We noticed that among all the new laws, or among all the amendments, there are two apparent tendency for the new things. The first one is the China government tries to simplify the administrative procedures. What does it mean? For example, when we complete a construction project, it used to be that the company needs to apply for an acceptance check to the local EPB, to the local Environmental Protection Bureau, to obtain approval from the bureau, and then the project is finished, and then the company can start to operate. But the things changed. Now, the the acceptance check is still needed, but it is the company that needs to finish all the acceptance check and also keep all the records. And the local EPB, the local bureau, will not issue an approval anymore. Which means that if something happens, it is the company who should be responsible for the accidents or for any other defects, because it is the company itself who conducted the acceptance check, who prepared all the documents, and who accepted that the construction project is completed. It's not the local bureau. And the government tries to exempt or try to waive certain of their responsibility through this way. So this is the one apparent tendency, which means that although the procedure was simplified, the burden of the company has increased a lot. The other tendency is also apparent that the penalties on the violations has increased a lot. For example, for the air emission, if a company discharged air emissions exceeding certain standards, the fine used to be like 10,000 to 100,000. But now, after amendment, the penalty would be imposed at least from 100,000 to 1 million. So it's almost like 10 times than the previous ones. And due to the regulation change, we can see that the penalties that actually received or actually issued by the local bureau has increased a lot. Since from 2016 to 2017 to 2018, it's almost double every year. It's the nationwide penalties. And for Shanghai, it's the same. Like by the end of 2016 to the 2017, we can see that the penalties in 2017 has been almost double than the penalties of 2016. And the reason is as I explained, the one reason is like the laws has been stricter, and the other reason is that the enforcement has been stricter, and the other critical reason would be that starting from 2016, the central government would dispatch the delegation group to the local government to supervise the environmental enforcement. For example, in Shanghai, it was dispatched in December 2016 to January 2017. So we can see that during 2017, the penalties issued by the Shanghai Environmental Protection Bureau was rapidly increased compared with the previous year. And also in 2017, a lot of small companies and non-compliance companies has been shut down, or the companies in heavily polluted industries has been shut down a lot during that year. So we can see that in 2018 and 2017, the penalty remains stable. But when it comes to Jiangsu, it's different because we can see that in 2018, last year, it has been more than double than 2017. We also consulted a lot of government officials to try to find out what happened during 2018. And a lot of officials replied us that because the central government has specifically pointed out that Jiangsu province has to improve their environmental conditions, and the local bureau also received a lot of pressure from the central government. So that's why from 2018, it's the penalties against environmental violations in Jiangsu province has substantially increased. And in addition to all the penalties, we also talked about the environmental compliance. So when we talk about the compliance, we also talk about the legal liabilities, like what kind of legal liability that could happen when we break some laws or when we have some behaviors that are not that compliant. Legal liabilities, unfortunately, for environmental areas, criminal liability, administrative, and civil liability, all of these liabilities could be imposed against environmental violations. Our bottom line, of course, would be like criminal liability. I believe that everybody of us would I would definitely avoid the criminal liabilities, no matter for whichever reasons. For environmental reasons, we can see that environmental crimes in China before like 2011 or 2010, the environmental crimes in China is almost nothing. And starting from 2014, the environmental crimes increased a lot. And in 2017, the environmental crimes increased rapidly again. So why? Because before 2014, the practice, although the criminal law says that we have a crime, which is drafted to regulate the environmental behaviors, but in practice we don't know which kind of behavior that would commit as a crime. And in 2017, the Supreme Court issued an interpretation specifically listed that 14 categories of behaviors that may commit as environmental crime. And this interpretation was amended in 2016, which increased the environmental criminal behaviors from 14 to 18. So it means that we have like 18, majorly we have like 18 categories of environmental behavior, of criminal behaviors that might commit as an environmental crime. We don't have time to talk one by one about all the behaviors, but I would emphasize certain critical or certain common things. One is the most critical one is about hazardous waste. We have dealt with certain criminal cases, and most of them are related to hazardous waste. So maybe you will ask, what is hazardous waste? This is a complicated question, but generally speaking, we have a category of hazardous waste which was published by the Ministry of Environmental Protection. And all the hazardous waste that were listed on that category would be considered as the hazardous waste. And if a company produces hazardous waste, for example, like medical waste, waste battery, or even waste paintings, something like that, how we deal with such waste? We have to find a certificated company to dispose of such waste. If we engaged an unqualified service company, we, the company who produce the waste, may also consider it as environmental crime. So be careful with this one. We have to check the certificate of our supplier. We have to check the service scope of our supplier to see whether they have the certificate or they have the qualification to dispose such kinds of hazardous waste. Otherwise, we might be in trouble. And also for the administrative liability, we have talked a lot about the fines. Like also, as I mentioned previously, the reason behind the increase of the fines, one reason is that the regulations and the laws became stricter, and the other reason is that the local bureau received a lot of pressure from the central government, because since January 2016, the central government will dispatch the delegation group to the local bureau every year. So we can see that so far the central government has dispatched 4 groups to the local bureau to supervise the environmental protection enforcement, and each time the delegation group will stay in certain place. That place, the Environmental Protection Bureau of the local officials, they were busy dealing with all the central government and dealing with all the reports that are received from the public. And during that time, the fines and the penalties were always typically they were increased a lot compared with the other time that they were not here. And also I read the news that MEE, the central government, has announced that the new round of environmental protection supervision by the central government delegation will be started again this year. So which means that another round of the environmental inspection and another round of environmental compliance supervision will start it again from this year. So I believe that enforcement for the next 5 or 4 years would be still strict, and also we need to be careful about our compliance status and about our current operations. And regarding the civil liability, so we face challenges from different perspectives. The first one that I mentioned is like the criminal ones, which we need to be careful with our operations. The second one is like the administrative penalties, which we may receive pressure from the government. And the third one, we also may receive challenges from the NGOs, because in recent years, the NGOs has been authorized to sue the companies which pollute the soil, the land, the water, the air, or whatever on behalf of public interests. We can see that a well-known case, which was shown on the picture. This is the well-known case of the poison land in Changzhou. The land in the up of the picture, there used to be 3 chemical factories, and which polluted the land, but they have moved out a couple years ago. And during the contamination of this land, which was responsible by the government was responsible for the contamination. But during the contaminations, they did not cover the land properly, and the smell came out and polluted the students, which started in the school in the picture. And therefore, couple NGOs sued the 3 companies, although they have been moved out, to be liable for the pollutants that they caused to the soil and also to the groundwater. And this case has went through for like 2 years, and the final decision of the court says that the 3 companies should be liable for their pollutants, and also they have to apologize to the public. But due to the government has been taken charge of the contamination, so seems like they did not have to pay anything, but they have to be liable for their behaviors. So this case reminded us that before we start our new investment, or before our start to establish a new factory, we had better to do a due diligence on the ground, on the soil, of the new site. And before we leave the site, before we close our factory, we also had better to do the due diligence of the soil conditions or the environmental conditions of our current status, in case further pollutants or happens on this land which was not caused by us. We have the evidence. And also I need to remind all the clients that during our operations, always remember to keep the records properly, because for the enforcement perspective, the Bureau used to pay lot of attention to the results. For example, they will see whether the emissions exceed the limits or not. If the emissions did not exceed the limits, the Bureau will say, okay, not bad, sounds like good. But now the Bureau also pay close attention to the management, which means that they will check the records, like how you operate your pollution prevention installations, how you draft or how you register your emergency response plans. Will you carry out the environmental emergency response plan drills? Do you have the records for the drills? Such like this. This is also important, and if we don't have such complete records, we could also be liable. It's possible that we will be liable for such defects. We have talked a lot about challenges and a lot of the difficulties. So what kind of suggestion that we have? Typically, I would say that first of all, we need to keep a close connection to the most updated laws and regulations. We always communicate with the local government to see what is their attitude. For example, before we start a new project, we are not sure whether they will approve such project. We are not sure whether they will approve such EIA or not. Maybe we can have a preliminary communication with them to see, like, okay, see, we have a new investment here, and we would like to expand our investment, and this is our initial plan. Do you think that we can make this plan feasible, or do you think that we need to improve anything? And also, we may have better do the periodic training and audit, no matter internal or external. We believe that many companies have like EHS specialists. We can also hire or engage certain parties to do such audits. And also, when we draft some contracts and when we seek for suppliers, we always check their certificate, and we always be careful with our contract with them. We can try to avoid or to protect ourselves, to reduce our risks during this contract and agreement. And also, when we have any questions, always to feel free to consult professional experts, like technical experts, like lawyers, and like also other specialists that we have. And if something serious really happened, we may also engage professional services to attend certain hearings or even arbitrations or litigations to do the dispute resolutions. And so, due to the time limit, I would introduce all of our environmental challenges and all our environmental compliance situations here. And this is my email address and phone number. If you have any questions regarding any environmental things or other legal issues, always feel free to let us know, and we will be glad to help you. Thank you for your attendance, and let me know if you have